So
Why
it's 88
88?
miles per hour, which is from Back to the Future. And it actually comes to John Kennedy, time travel. They equal the same value. So I've spoken about that a lot.
Is 88 mph in Back to the Future?
Yes. Yes.
The actual figure of 88?
Yes. So in Back to the Future, Marty McFly has to travel back in the DeLorean, which is 74, which is Jesus, has to travel back in time, and 88 miles per hour is the magic number that it does it at. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Tom Sidney Bushnell here from Psych Club, aka Numbers, or Tom Numbers, as some people like to call me. And I'm here with the fantastic Mr. Peter Hitchens. How are you, Peter?
Well, so far so good, but I'm still 70 years old.
70. Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic number. I mean, you know, I hope I can be as lucid.
3 years and 10. That's what it is. It's one of those biblical numbers. It's what you're allowed. If a man come to 80 years, yet it is but labor and sorrow, as the psalm says. So the longer it goes on, the more the parts wear out, and you can't trade it in for a new model.
Exactly. Well, hopefully, I continue to wish you good health and prosperity, and may 70 just be the beginning of your of life for you. So
yeah, maybe. It doesn't feel that way. I have to say I get rather irritated. People say, "Oh, it's just a new 40," or "It's just a number." I promise you, it's
not. Okay.
It's like the numbers on the mileometer on the car. You know, if you've done that, then you've done it, and things are going to start going wrong now. That knocking sound you hear in the big end, that's real.
I can relate. I mean, I'm 47. I can relate a little bit, but not completely, but I can relate. Yeah. I mean, I'm getting there. So, yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming on the show. Those that are new viewers and also new to Peter, because a lot of people will know Peter. I wanted to ask Peter, where's the best place for people to find you? You're obviously on Twitter, but any other? Well, please share your Twitter handle and any other.
Well, I am on Twitter. I'm on Twitter because it's rapid. It's quite like broadcasting, which I don't get to do as much as I want to. But my most basic occupation is a weekly columnist on the London Mail on Sunday newspaper, which you can read in the paper, which I thoroughly recommend. It's a good popular newspaper, crammed with stuff, way ahead of the competition. And I appear in that. You can also find me online. I have a blog, likewise, which is where you can find a large backlog of articles, book reviews, articles on huge numbers of subjects. It's indexed, it's archived, and it's readily searchable for practically any subject. And there's a lot of it there. So, and then I have published a number of books, most of them on the decline of civilization, really, beginning in 1999 with a book called The Abolition of Britain, which is still, I'm rather proud to say, in print more than 20 years later, and a number of others in the same vein. My most recent book was called The Phony Victory, and was a discussion of the strange, almost religious obsession with the Second World War in British politics, and how it's based on, in many cases, on false understandings of what actually happened. And I've just completed and delivered the manuscript of a book on grammar schools, the type of British school. It doesn't mean the same in the United States as it does here. They are high schools, but academically selective high schools, which used to exist in Britain in large numbers and made our education system very good. And because they were so good, they were abolished.
Oh, so true. Yeah, so true. Anything good, let's get rid of it. Yeah. I have this continual thing with my brother. I'm quite adventurous in nature, and I like to try new foods and flavors of things. So anything that is a different variety in the supermarket, they bring it in, it's popular, and then they get rid of it. So
well, it obviously wasn't that popular. I've often suggested that market research people
maybe that's the case.
Could pay me large sums of money by testing products on me. If I like it, then they can absolutely guarantee it'll fail.
I think that we should do our own tasting club, Peter. But like, just
it saves so much developmental money if they could just go to me and I say, yeah, I really like this. Oh well, in that case, if Hitchens likes it, nobody else will. Let's not produce that.
That's it. I think that could be an alternate career. That could be a side thing. That could be a little bit.
There's a lot of money to be made, and if only people would latch onto it. I'm a gold miner. Things people won't want to.
If only they realise. If only they realise. Well, there you go. Anyone, Walker's Chris or anyone else, Peter's your man. And I don't mind doing a little bit of tasting with you, Peter. I wanted to point something out at the beginning. So people on my channel know me as Tom Numbers, and that kind of came about as a name because I started doing this thing called simple gematria, which is very simply A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, because of the order in the alphabet. It comes. And so it just kind of grew. I didn't even call myself Tom Numbers, but that's the name that kind of I got. But I noticed something really quite interesting with you. And just before camera, we were talking about things of like, clocks going back and things like that. And the subject of time travel came up. So hence I was wearing this T-shirt today, which comes to 88 miles per hour. It's a reference to Back to the Future. But if you do the numbers on it, 88 plus MPH, which is 37, it comes to 125, which comes to time travel, comes to dark light, and it comes to John Kennedy. But I prepared something a lot earlier for you, Peter, when we first spoke a few weeks ago to arrange the conversation. And I looked at your full name. So Peter Jonathan, without the H at the beginning, Hitchens, comes to 233, which actually comes to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And I thought, oh, wow.
Well, you can have all that stuff if you want. I know that the Bible is full of numbers, and 40 is tremendously significant, and so of course is 12, and 7, and numbers of others. And numbers are fascinating, and prime numbers are extraordinary and often very surprising. And I actually quite enjoy the times tables, but I don't go on with your numerology. We'll be at the Great Pyramid next before we know where we are. And I think
we're at the Great Pyramid.
Stay away from there.
Yeah,
but numbers are indeed gripping, and of course they are a language, and one say full of surprises, but also a very good. A good framework for looking at some languages are very numerical in their structure. Latin, for instance, is almost like doing algebra because you have to get everything to work out. Whereas English isn't like that at all. English is a much freer language, and you can speak it without almost without rules, and it will still be comprehensible. But I won't go along with you all the way there.
No,
I did enjoy Back to the Future a lot, especially since I had some part of my job involved reporting the collapse of the DeLorean company in Belfast when it finally fell to bits. Such a sad story. Is that where it was?
In Belfast?
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. Was that DeLorean got the development authorities in Northern Ireland to subsidise and to build a factory in Dunmurry in South Belfast, because they were, of course, very anxious to create new jobs, particularly for the Roman Catholic minority who mainly live around there. And if it had worked, it would have been fantastic. There would have been thousands of jobs for people who couldn't get jobs in a part of the world where they were badly needed. But of course, it wasn't quite that straightforward. Great idea, terrible execution, I think we can say. But the car, of course, became a national joke in Britain because of all this and all the things which involved John DeLorean, most of which I've now forgotten.
Yes.
Including, I remember, a very attractive wife who he produced, I think, at his trial at one point. But when the car appeared in Back to the Future, I think in British cinemas, more people laughed more profoundly than practically anywhere else because it was such a funny thing.
So it's almost like a larder in some ways, maybe.
Oh, no, much, much, much funnier than that. Okay. Lada was never an ambitious car. It wasn't sort of luxury in the future. Lada was just a thing which went along. But a DeLorean had these great ambitions to be the future, and it wasn't.
Wow.
It wasn't even the past.
Well, you've added to my my knowledge on that, Peter, because I didn't know the Belfast connection. I actually did.
Yeah, look it up. It's
fascinating.
Belfast,
I didn't know that.
It's a fascinating trail. I was in Dublin covering an Irish general election when the news came in that it was closing, and I hurried up from Dublin to Belfast, one of the great journeys in the world, by the way, because in those days, particularly, you moved from one totally different civilization to another, to cover the fact that the DeLorean factory had shut. It was a terrible thing for a lot of people who had great hopes in it. Very sad story.
Wow. It's interesting, the thing of DeLorean, and you brought that kind of front and focus in regards to Back to the Future, because the word DeLorean actually comes to 74 in Gematria, and actually the word Gematria itself comes to 74. But another fascinating thing, you mentioned the Bible.
Must mean something, Tom, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
No, I know. It's just peppering.
I'm not getting it. As long as they don't all end up with JFK, that's
there you go. Well, JFK comes to code actually 27, but that's
no, leave it out. Come on, we must move on.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is Jesus actually comes to 74, and Messiah comes to 74 as well, and Muhammad and English and London. So I'll leave it at that. But Peter, let's talk about I really wanted to delve into your belief about God, and I have a belief in God. But what is your belief and feeling on the nature of God and nature of reality? And it's a chaotic time right now for people in many ways. A lot of people are progressing, but a lot of people are retrograding because of what's going on but I really wanted this to be a kind of message of hope and discovery, and particularly in the nature of reality and of God. So if we could, the floor is yours.
No, it's very simple, and I won't take up much of your time on it. There is a universe of great complexity and
yes,
enormous size, constructed, or at least existing at very fine tolerances in engineering terms. And there are two explanations to this. One is that it's a meaningless chaos resulting from a series of cosmic car crashes, and the other is that it's a designed and therefore authored system which contains in it a purpose and a language and a meaning. Now, for me, given the choice between those two possibilities, I have to choose the idea that it's designed and has a purpose and has a meaning. And that's the fundamental impulse that I think the universe, to have attained the shape in which we now find it, really does need to have a creator to explain it. But I would happily accept, you see, the alternative case, which is that the whole thing is wholly random and accidental and might never have happened and might never happen again, as an explanation. But the implications of these two beliefs are what's really important. If you think that the universe is a car crash, then your actions have no meaning beyond their immediate measurable effect. And for a lot of people, this is quite a comforting thought, that that there's no accounting for anything, that the horrors of the Last Judgment, for instance, or whatever it is you believe might happen in an afterlife, if there is such a thing, are expunged. You can say, no, this is all nonsense. You're just imagining the fact that the world was created. You're imagining the fact that there is any kind of deity, and you're just making it up. And I feel much freer to do as I would and create what I want and act as I would without it. I completely understand the atheist impulse because I used to have it. And then I found that I found it unsatisfactory as I grew older and took on more responsibilities and had seen more of the world and more of life. And I've been very lucky in the amount of the world that I've seen. I just found it unsatisfactory and inadequate as an explanation. Very convenient to me, because like most people, I'm not very nice. But it's on the other hand, not actually intellectually bearable. And that's the first thing. This is a totally separate question from the next one, which many people then get engaged in and mix up as being the same, which is, what is the nature of the deity or God? And the most obvious explanation of the universe was given by Einstein, who was not an atheist, by the way. I must add very carefully and instantly to that he was also not a religious believer. Yes. But he was not scornful of religious belief. What he was scornful of, I think, was the forms that religions had taken, and they often, as he regarded, simple-minded myths which they expanded. He said, anybody looking at the universe with any observational skills, sees as it's as if they were a child walking into an enormous library. I always imagine, when I hear this story, I always imagine the great library at Trinity College Dublin, which I don't know if you've seen. It's one of the most beautiful libraries in the world, and it's full of these volumes.
Not had the pleasure to go in it, no.
Well, if you ever do get the chance to see it, it is absolutely gloriously beautiful library. But what he says that here's this library, the child is in it, it's full of these books written in a language that the child can't even read, let alone understand. And here it is, and this is the universe set before the thinking person. So you're confronted with something which plainly has an order. Yes. And this was evident to Einstein. There was an order to it of some kind, but you had absolutely no capacity to understand it. I very much take that. I think that the thing is so vast.
Yes.
And comes from, in my view, a mind so great that the human mind balks at it. And if I then make the jump into the form of the Christian religion, which I embrace, which is the Anglicanism, Church of England.
Yes.
What I would say is that it offers a means by which to grasp the nature of the universe, yes. And it also offers a very great measure of hope for yes. eternity, and also a promise of justice. Now, yes. Again, as you grow older, you'll find that justice, which you believe in, you watch To Kill a Mockingbird and all the other crime and courtroom dramas on the television and the cinema, and you think that actually justice always triumphs. In real life, it doesn't. Mm. You'll know, whether at a workplace or even in family life sometimes, or in all kinds of areas of life, there is no real justice. People do not obtain it. It's not there. And yet we yearn constantly for such justice.
Yes.
So how is it that we have almost innate within us, it seems to me, such a yearning for a thing we cannot have in temporal life? And therefore I think that the seat of justice and the place where we shall find it lies in eternity rather than in our mortal lives. And the other point that I would make is that if you read, as I increasingly do with care, particularly the Gospels of the New Testament, mm-hmm. and I read them in the King James, the authorized version of the Bible, because the beauty of them makes them, I think, more comprehensible. Is that if Jesus Christ was God, mm-hmm. Come to earth in human form, as I believe that he was, yes. then what he ceaselessly does is communicates in parables, in imagery. Yes. There was no such person as the Good Samaritan. He never existed, nor did most of he knew that he would only get his listeners to understand these huge subjects if he reduced them to what people dismiss as myth. But myth is very important. The way in which stories are told helps people to understand things much deeper than they appear to do. And you can read the story of the Good Samaritan or the parable of the prodigal son 100 times, and you can see it. This is another thing I recommend to you if you're over on the eastern side of the Atlantic. See them in the stained glass windows in the cathedral at Chartres, and your understanding of the universe, even if you're not a believer, will be greatly deeper.
Yeah,
if that makes any kind of sense, that's a summary of how of what I mean when I say the creed.
Yeah, I concur with your feelings there, Peter. One thing that did kind of strike a chord is when you talked about the intelligent design, and I think it's appropriate to bring it up. I won't bamboozle you with numbers, but I have one that I think is appropriate for where we've come along in the discussion. And simply, it's this: if you were to add the alphabet up sequentially, so A1, B2, C3, all the way through to Z26, comes to the value of 351. And one value for that number is actually, it comes to God communicates through numbers 351. Could we talk about this thing of intelligent design? Because I believe in that. I believe that God is an intelligent designer, and I believe that belief in a creator is a motivating and driving force. And you said that you used to be of the atheist position, but you felt that
yes.
But now that you've got this kind of almost, you can correct me if I'm wrong in your interpretation, but it felt like you had this driving it almost gives you a purpose and a belief and almost a joy in life. Without that, and I'm of that same persuasion.
It's not that it gives it. It's not that it gives it to you. It's that if you say this is something I don't accept, and all these beliefs are choices. There is no way of establishing that either of these things is true. No one has established it, nor are they likely to do. If you choose not to, you deprive yourself of those meanings. But as I say, I think a lot of people want to deprive themselves of meanings. Thomas Nagel, one of the most eloquent of the atheist philosophers, has asked, why is it that I so much want there not to be a God? He didn't answer the question, but I think that in the case of many atheists, it's quite obvious. Most of us have lived lives in which we have done things we wish we hadn't done, and not done things we wish we had done, and look back on the wreckage and mistaken actions that we've taken, and don't particularly want to be held to account for it. And I think that is the driving force of a lot of atheism among intelligent people, and I sympathize with it. The problem is that you cannot, simply by taking thought, dismiss from the universe the idea that it might be designed, and that it might have a creator, and that there might be an eternity in which there might be justice. And it seems to me that both the atheist and the religious believer fear that there is a creator, but the religious believer simultaneously wants there to be a creator, and this is the bizarre division in the mind of the religious believer. He both, so when he says things such as the great Bible quotation, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," there is an element of fear. What if I have got all this wrong? What if what around me that I've taken for granted as something which has just developed out of a cosmic accident? What if it is in fact a creator universe in which I have a part to play? What then should I do?
Yes.
How to be good? But once you've reached that point, that's it. I prefer not to go into any more depth. It's a private matter. I don't even seek to persuade people.
Yeah, sure.
I don't actually think that if you stand in the street and say believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, you're going to get anybody to do so.
No, no.
In fact, almost the reverse. You'll just make people think all religious believers are mad. So I don't do any of that. If people ask me, I'll say, I'll defend. Yes. I because of my brother's great attack on religion, I was pushed into having to discuss it by in one case by a publisher very anxious to get me to write a book rebutting his, which in the end turned out to be quite a successful and satisfying book to write, and some people have found it satisfying to read as well. But so I got to know more about it than I originally had intended to or even wanted to, and it's not really a subject that I'm happy to discuss at any great length. I'll say that you asked me what the basic position that I hold is, and that's it.
Yeah.
I don't have what I am most fundamentally saying is it's a choice. All belief is a choice based on desire. Anybody who denies that is deluding themselves. Belief is a choice based on what do you desire, and the really interesting question is why you desire it. And I think I've been into that.
Yes. You mentioned your brother Christopher there, Peter. Can I ask when the shift happened for you? Because you said there was a period of your life when you were atheist and then you became a believer in God and Jesus. What time period did that happen for you? Or over?
I would say it was mostly in my early 30s, really. Okay. And before then, I suppose between the age of about 15 and about 32, 33, I was a pretty confirmed and convinced atheist. I began to have doubts about it, I suppose, in my early 30s, but they didn't form themselves into an actual decision to be confirmed as a member of the church until I think 1984, when I was 33.
Okay. If it's not too,
I may have got that date wrong if anybody was keeping records, but I doubt that they were. But something like that. But it was. I just found that it's most fundamentally it's a deepening experience of life and indeed death that brings these things to you. I've been very fortunate in some ways in my life in that I've had a lot of experiences people will never have or seldom have. But I've also had quite a few rather unpleasant experiences, which I hope other people don't have, which also concentrate the mind.
If it's not too personal a question, can I ask, was there anything that precipitated that change for you at that kind of pull on the road to Damascus, or Saul to Damascus?
I've said it wasn't the road to Damascus. There were no swoons, no fainting fits, no blinding flashes of light. It was a long process during which, for some time, I resisted it.
Okay.
Most atheists resist. In fact, probably the non-atheists resist the idea of becoming religious believers. They don't fancy it. It's going to cost you friends. It's going to lead to ridicule. It's going to compel you to change your life in all kinds of ways, some of which may not be particularly welcome. So you will hold off. I've always described changing your mind as being by a door, which you know perfectly well there is a room on the other side of the door, in which there are things which you want to see, but on the other hand, you hesitate because by opening the door and stepping into the other room, you will change your life in some ways for the worse. So people don't do it, and there's no more impregnable fortress than a closed mind. And people close their minds because they're afraid of what might happen to them if they change them. It's quite normal.
I don't know if this is a appropriate question or not, but if your brother Christopher was still with us, do you think, knowing him as you did, do you think he may have come to a similar conclusion, just with more time on the board?
No, absolutely not. It was very much his nature and his character, his attitude towards the universe from a very early age. He took this view, and it's a characteristic of a certain kind of intellect, I think. He was a utopian who believed that all kinds of huge improvements could be attained in this world by the effort of human beings, something which I increasingly find I don't believe. And that was that kept him going. And there's a great division which really took place, I think, in the 17th and 18th centuries. The idea had always been in the Christian belief that man was made in the image of God and was fundamentally unalterable. But the utopian reformers, the people who were behind the ideas of the French Revolution, who wanted to change the nature of humanity, they believed you could change man. And I believe that was the fundamental mistake. That's why utopian, supposedly benevolent movements almost always end up with death camps, because they find they can't change people, so they have to scare them to death or kill them to get them to behave in the way they want them to do. And even then, they don't do it. But the utopianism leads to the death camp because man fundamentally isn't changeable. Human nature isn't unalterable, and this may or may not be because we are made in the image of God. But that's what I think it is. But it is a great intellectual division of the past 500 years. Those who think that man is an alterable thing and can be changed into a new man, and those who think that man is ultimately always the same and cannot be so changed.
Yeah, the two camps, change or not change. That's interesting. Obviously, you've changed. I think we're all. I mean,
no, I haven't. I remain the same person.
Well, yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I don't mean fundamentally. I mean in terms of a major outlook in your life.
When I was a child, I haven't. What the utopian wishes to do is to change the whole nature of man, so he behaves differently from the way he's always behaved before. And I say, for instance, he expects human beings to cease to live in families. In many utopians cherish this desire, and to live instead in common circumstances, not to own property, not to have any of those characteristics. And these things pursued to the bitter end lead to misery. One interesting society which went in the utopian direction to begin with was the state of Israel, where the common life in kibbutzim was in many cases very seriously pursued. The children didn't really have individual parents. They were brought up by the community, and it's been abandoned peacefully because it didn't work. But in the Soviet society, which set out pretty much to abolish lifelong marriage and turn marriage into an easily dissoluble contract, and meant that the state was immensely more powerful in children's lives than their parents were. And he even made a hero out of this horrible little creep, Pavlik Morozov, who was supposed to have betrayed his parents to the KGB. That society came to a much more violent end. And then, of course, the attempts by Mao Zedong, particularly, which have now been described so brilliantly by Ducotta, the historian, to try and create an ideal society by massacring landlords and driving people out of their homes and turning intellectuals into peasants and things of that kind. That has also been a terrible bloodstained failure. The ultimate one, of course, is Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge experiment in Cambodia, a sea of blood. But as I repeatedly say, the problem with utopia is that you can only approach it across a sea of blood, and you never arrive.
Peter, if I could ask about in the Christian faith and other ways of believing in the world, there's this thought of a millennial reign, of when Christ will return, and there'll be peace amongst people and nations. What's your perspective on that? Do you feel that God can intervene here on the earth and make things better for us, or do you think that's kind of more of just a parable in reality? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's been said. I can't remember which of the saints or the great Christian figures said this, that it may have been St. Teresa of Avila, but that God has no hands on earth but ours. That God's work on this planet is done by human beings. My view would certainly be that he does what he can, but he does it through us, and we very often fail or refuse to do what he wishes us to do, and sometimes do the opposite. And so when people say, well, where is God in the concentration camps? God is, in my view, horribly pained by these things and wants humans to act to end and prevent them. But where humans fail to do so, then that is how it happens. Is when man turns away, when he turns his face away from the known wishes of God, that's when the problems begin. Just as the old saying that it's exactly in those states where people proclaim that there is no such thing as hell, that hell very rapidly grows up in such societies. And what closer approximation to hell is there than the death camps of the Nazis or the Gulag? These both grew up, and people say, oh, the Nazis were Christians, which they weren't. They both grew up in places where men of power had renounced the Christian religion and made increasingly furious attacks on it.
Where do you see the future of humanity going in the short to long term, Peter? Do you think we're doomed, or do you think there is?
I have no idea. I can't even see my own future tomorrow morning, let alone the future of the planet. There's no more certain way of making a fool of yourself than making predictions as to how things are going. I don't think at the moment things are going particularly well for human civilization, I have to say. But when people say, well, why are you such a pessimist? Why do you keep telling us to give up? I say, look, I'd be delighted if any of you could prove me wrong. But at the moment, it doesn't look good to me. I think we've chucked aside a lot of good things and not replaced them with anything better.
What are some of the things that you think that have been chucked aside that should be brought back, or replaced with something better, but at least restored and brought back?
There's a fascinating book called The World of Yesterday by the Austrian author Stefan Zweig, in which he describes the society of Vienna before the First World War. And of course, you and I would find this utterly stifling. This huge amount of parental authority. The school teacher in the school has immense power, and you have to sit and listen. People are tremendously decorous by the standards of now. There's no walking around in scruffy clothes or any of that kind of thing. I would find it oppressive. You would find it oppressive, and it would be difficult for any of us to cope with. But the truth is that before 1914, the European civilizations had reached a level of civilization which was very peaceful, was not imposed by violence, was imposed by what you might call social force, in which I think happiness was probably more possible than at any time before or since. Now, what's happened since is that we have a society in which many more people are free to do as they will, and some of them attain happiness that way, and we've all got used to it. As I say, would find that sort of society extremely oppressive and hard to live with and stifling. But an awful lot of people have found unhappiness. And the classic example of this is we're told all the time that the breakup of marriages must be considered as normal. People should be allowed to get on with their own lives. They shouldn't be compelled to remain together with somebody else against their will. And of course, there's a lot of truth in this. There's a lot of unhappiness in unhappy marriages. And in fact, what divorce is about is not letting people leave. You can leave somebody without divorcing them. What divorce is about is in allowing people to get married while they're still married to somebody else, which is what undermines the whole basic idea of don't get married in the first place unless you intend to make a go of it. Yeah. This is it's like all these moral questions. The real thing is the intention at the beginning. If people were more cautious about getting married and got married with serious intent, there'd be less breakup. What I would very much like to see is a society with more concern for the raising of children. Yes. Because ultimately, stable family life is, to me, an indispensable part of that. And where it doesn't exist, okay, people will do as well as they can. This is no criticism, as it will immediately be characterized by my enemies. This is no criticism of individuals who are compelled to bring up children in single-parent households, as many are. They do the best they can, but they can't conceivably, and this is statistical fact, they can't do as well as they would do if it were a stable two-parent family, particularly with boys. I mean, the number of boys without actual fathers present in their lives in modern Western societies is a disgrace. That's one thing I'd seek to put right. Not by compelling people to do anything, but by removing a lot of the pressures which force families apart and make it hard for them to stay together, which have been imposed by social policy and government over the past 50 or 60 years. So that's one example I give. Another, of course, is education, where I would say the purpose of education is, first of all, to fit people to be able to live effectively, to find work. And work is a hugely important thing. People who don't work, often it's very, very bad for them. Fit them to be able to work, but also to enable them to think to the highest level that they're capable of. And people differ in that capacity, in my view. And the fundamental foundation of thinking is knowledge. And it's almost anybody I know who's happy is someone who's had a good education, and basically who's learned their basic mathematics, the grammar, who speaks their own language, who can read and write fluently. Preferably they can speak or have some familiarity with foreign languages as well, and also some grasp of the scientific method. And if you give people those basic things, which tend to be only the products of a disciplined education based on authority, then they can think. But instead of doing that, which is, in my view, teaching people how to think by giving them the materials with which they can do so, we teach people what to think. We indoctrinate them in various opinions which they're expected to hold, while never bothering to actually teach them how. And those are two things we could put right. I hate the motor car, for instance. I wish it had never been invented. Henry Ford is one of the people in history who I most loathe, and his English imitator, William Morris, Lord Nuffield. I think the motor car was a disaster for civilization. We would have got on much better without it. We design our lives around this horrible, noisy, filthy machine, which is the enemy of decently designed cities. It puts everything out of range. It means that the distance between work and home is huge. It means cities are designed so that you can't walk anywhere. They're anti-exercise. In the country where the car is, of course, absolute king, the United States, there are cities where walking is almost an eccentricity. And so it's removed exercise. I remember once Hillary Clinton saying about cigarettes that they were the one product which, used according to the manufacturer's instructions, would damage their user. And I thought, that can't be true. There must be another. And I thought about it for a bit. And the motor car is it. Everywhere I go, I look at bicycling around Oxford this morning. I can't tell you how many chiropractic and osteopathic shopfront surgeries I saw. The back problems which people get, I think almost universally the result of spending too much time driving cars, never walking. The heart disease, which is so common among us, results from societies being designed in such a way that they exclude exercise from human lives. So if you ask me if I wanted to make a really major radical improvement, I'd say redesign society so you don't need private cars. I mean, obviously there are uses for motor vehicles. Ambulances are wonderful, and so are fire engines, and so are some other things. And taxis could be useful as well for some sorts of journey. But for everybody to have, and for all journeys to rely on people traveling, often on their own, in a 1-ton steel box powered either by fuel imported from some Middle Eastern despotism, or manufactured or put into batteries from some similar source, isn't a good way of running a transport system. Get on your feet, walk about, bicycle, and where that fails, bring back the electric tram, that most wonderful form of urban transport, which used to be incredibly common in the United States as well as in Britain, and has now been wiped out by the car because it got in the way of the cars. Well, my view is the cars got in the way of the trams, and they should put them back. If you ever seen the film Double Indemnity? Very fine film, Barbara Stanwyck.
I don't know if I have.
Set in Los Angeles just in the late 30s. It's a very, very good murder mystery. But in it, you see an extraordinary thing. You see Los Angeles, and it's got trams. And because it used to have one of the most extensive public transport networks in North America, completely ripped out because of the road lobby.
You mentioned.
So you asked me, and I've told you now. These are things I would.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the. I hadn't thought about the removal of cars like that. That's actually.
Cars do so much damage.
You make a very good point. Yeah.
And the number of, I mean, if 20 people are killed in a train crash, it's huge headlines all over the place. But if 20 people are killed in car crashes in the same day, it's barely noticed. But each of these things is a terrible tragedy, and quite needless in my view. We don't need it.
You talked about ambulances and fire engines and taxis occasionally, and you mentioned the thing of electric trams. It made me think of Elon, and then his whole purchasing of Twitter and the whole kind of battle of free speech. Any thoughts on that? Do you think Elon's going to improve that, or do you think it would just kind of?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I'm waiting to see. The whole of Twitter is a mystery to me. But let's hope that it will improve it. Put it like that. But there's a great tendency in the social media world to impose various forms of censorship, which seems to me to be getting severely out of hand. So if his arrival in Twitter pushes that back, then it can't be bad. But I'll wait and see whether it actually happens before I do any rejoicing, if that's okay by you.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, proof is, hindsight is always 20/20, and it's usually wait and see. Do you have any talking of social media? You're on Twitter. Is there any reason you're on that one as opposed to any others? Any
well, I'm also on Facebook, but I find it's.
Oh, you are on Facebook. Okay.
Really is like watching paint dry. I don't know quite why everything that happens on Facebook is so slow.
Yeah, a bit of nonsense.
It just is. There is no joy in it.
You talked about the whole thing of the dismantling of the family and how society has kind of forced people into separation. What's a couple of things that you think could be brought back or restored to reverse that flow?
Well, I think actually, again, the way of life which we lead puts a lot of pressure on this. People are now working a long way from home for very long hours, which makes it very difficult to sustain married life as it used to be in my childhood. When the other thing is this huge pressure on women to believe that going out to work is intellectually and morally satisfying, whereas raising the next generation is an occupation to be despised. And people say, well, what about men? Can't men raise children? I say, well, maybe they can, but then I'm happy for them to be given the same chance. But I think a society in which one income was enough to pay the rent or the mortgage and pay the food bill and buy a decent annual holiday, instead of it being absolutely always two now, and in which somebody stayed at home to raise the children. I'm not going to be prescriptive as to whether it be the man or the woman, would be better. But I think an awful lot of women have been talked out of doing something immensely satisfying and valuable on the basis that it's better to go off and work in a call center or a lawyer's office than it is, as I say, to do that thing for which there is no substitute, raising the next generation to be good people. Why is this task so denigrated by modern feminism? Why are women who stay at home and do it treated as if they were nobodies? But it is a strong social pressure. I think that should go.
How do you think we can change that? How do you think that?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. This is
policy from top down.
I'm pessimistic. The change has been the result of a cultural revolution. And a cultural revolution, in which I took part in my teens and 20s, and which has been immensely successful, has taken over the schools, the universities, the broadcasting studios, the newspapers, everywhere where opinions are formed, is now in the hands of people who believe these things. And whereas, again, when I was a child, it wasn't, and it may have perhaps tipped too far the other way, but the fact is that it's totally changed. It's been a very, very long job to change it, and I don't see at the moment anybody with the capacity or the knowledge or the desire to change it back. So it may be that those who believe in a different way of life are just going to have to form separate colonies and head off to the hills to do it. I don't know. I have no idea. If anybody has any good ideas as to how to do a reverse cultural revolution, then let me know.
Do you think that the revolution you said you were involved in when you were young with that, I assume you know in your university years, was the inception of those in think tanks? Where did it come from? Where was the genesis of those ideas that have perforated society?
The ideas have been around for a long time. The ideas basically came from the 18th century Enlightenment, and particularly they were the ideas of the French Revolution as well. They were anti-religious ideas. They were fundamentally anti-religious ideas, a belief that man could free himself from the tyranny of the church and the priest-ridden society which they believed we lived in. And the church did then obligingly collapse, more or less totally after the First World War, in my view, which was the First World War is the greatest event I don't mean great in terms of good, I mean in terms of size, the greatest event in history since the fall of the Roman Empire. That was the point at which the world which I described, the Stefan Zweig world, the world of yesterday, came to an end. And into the vacuum left by the collapse of the Christian religion came all kinds of other ideas. People were saying, well, the question which any ordinary thinking person asks at some point in his or her life is, how shall I be good? How can I be good? What shall I do to be good? And once Christian religion has faded away from European society, from what was Christendom, they searched for new ideas, and the new ideas which were offered were the ideas which were offered by the utopian left, who said we can create an entirely new form of society if we follow these precepts, and they were very successful. It doesn't get supporters because it's unattractive. It's an attractive thing, the idea that you can create an entirely new, fairer, happier, freer society, which is how you always think it's going to end. But it hasn't ended that way.
So time for a reverse, time for change.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it took a long time. A lot of the origins of what happened in the 60s and 70s and is now pretty much complete. Go back even before the First World War. The ideas, say, go back to the 18th century, but they were very prevalent in certain parts of society, so the Bloomsbury parts before the First World War. even got going. And what I don't see at the moment is any kind of serious intellectual force being devoted to saying, how do we get out of this mess?
You've brought a thought to my mind there, Peter. So we've all lived through this spring of 2020 when lockdowns occurred. I don't know the exact numbers on it, but it felt like maybe 80% of people were, working from home. In my kind of simplistic look at it, it seemed like a lot of jobs were non-essential, and therefore people still seem to, somehow survive. There was the furlough program, etc. But it seems to have an echo or a reverberation of what you're saying about making societies smaller, closer together, the not need for transport, driving, etc. It's
well, maybe
kind of
that you've raised a whole different subject. We could have an entire interview on that. I don't. By the way, I have to go very soon. We're going
okay. Well, maybe part two we'll do that if you're up for it. But it's an interesting thought you just brought to my mind. I was like, well, yeah, I think he's onto something about that.
Well, I think I am onto something, but it goes much wider than that.
Mm. Okay. Well, hey, maybe if you're up for it, we can do part two on that, because I do feel
actually. Do you know what? I'm not. I endured the shutdown and I fought against it. I described it as like a man finding a wasp nest in his house and burning down the house to get rid of it. I thought it was a ludicrous overreaction to it. A genuine problem, but one certainly not deserving the response that was given.
The time and attention it
took.
took.
I warned that at the time of the damage that it would do the damage to the health service itself, which we were told we were protecting, to the economy and to people's lives and to the education of the young. I said it all, and I might as well have been talking to the cat, honestly. In fact, she would have made more sense of it than most people I did try to tell. So I'm sick and tired of it now.
Yeah, well, it's gone, thankfully.
Well, it may be back in another form because people.
That's true. As I say it, I'm thinking, oh, hang on, don't speak too early.
Not gone in China, for instance. It's absolutely still going on in China. And there are a number of people in this country who think that that's how it should be going here too. So it's not gone. That's, if we end on a pessimistic note, just don't be by any means sure that won't happen again. But now we have war. Now we have war instead, and that's another subject on which we don't really.
Well, Peter, thank you for
I'd rather not start because it's so complicated.
No, okay. Well, thank you for your time. It's been really interesting and fascinating to hear your thoughts on those things. And I just wanted to say, we talked about the whole tasting thing, and Peter's your man for that. But also, I don't know if it's ever been suggested, but you did make me chuckle a number of times. And I don't know if you've ever thought about doing, the stand-up circuit, because your dry sense of humor is priceless. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
It's good of you to say so, but I officially have no sense of humor, and I have a certificate from the Federal German Institute of Humorlessness to prove it. And so don't get any ideas of that kind.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is comedy gold, but thank you. Thanks, Peter. God bless you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good evening, or whatever it is where you are. Okay.
Oh, well, I'm in London, so
are you? I wasn't sure where you were.
Yeah, I'm in London. So, yeah, good evening to you as well.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.